we know how much competition there is for all time.
Okay, is it?
The other things I will say are the thanks that we want to make. So, who's
Got the sign. You got the sign.
got the sign?
Yep.
Well, I think we're ready. So I want to say, in addition to saying welcome to all of you who are here at Milwaukie Living Library for our reading tonight by Wendy Willis. Welcome to those of you that are live streaming this on the Living Library YouTube channel. Thank you for being here. I just thank the audience here. I can say that we know how much competition there is for all our times, and we know how many things are going on. And so thank you for choosing to spend the time in support of us and in support of Wendy and coming to see the reading. So thank you very much. Other thanks to make are to the city of Milwaukie. The city of Milwaukee has supported us from the beginning. That was 60 years ago. We're very, very, very grateful. Secondly, thanks to the Living Library. I was having a little conversation before that about the Pond House. The Pond House, which we used to be in for, I think, the first 8 or 9 years of the series. And the Pond House was sold, was an asset that the city had. And so they needed to look at doing that. And the owners have done some extensive remodeling. So probably a little hard to see in the dark now. It's not the same Pond House, but we have very fond memories of it.
What's the use?
No question. You know, I really don't know.
What?
And I'm not sure who bought it. It's a law.
Yeah.
Okay.
Poetic justice.
Okay. So that's so it's a law office. But thanks to the Living Library, and this is the library that was built. So we have a one-story library now that is on the footprint here. And it extended this way a little bit to connect better with Scott Park to the north. So that's been really good. It's a lovely library, no question about it. So thanks to the Living Library and to our technician tonight, Tara Go, who is here. So thank you, Tara.
Thanks for your patience.
Well, we're glad that it got set up. We want to thank Willamette Falls Media. So Willamette Falls Media is the live streaming agent, and that's who is responsible for our live streaming, and especially Josh Reynolds. Josh is our technician. So thank you very much, Josh, for everything that you're doing. And finally, I want to thank the Milwaukie Poetry Series Committee. So as you know, you hear me say this all the time. You don't have something happen unless you have people that are working on it, and we do. So Bev Spurgeon is here from the Milwaukie Poetry Series, in addition to me tonight. So she's been the one that was responsible for producing our survey work. So thank you very much for doing that. Now, I've been looking forward to this reading, and I'm very excited about it. Wendy was here originally for our first reading in October of 2013. So that was very soon after her first poetry book, Sisters of the Republic, came out, which I think was in 2012. So we're glad to have you back again. She is, as we know, a poet and an essayist. And her book of essays, These Are Strange Times, my dear, was published by Counterpoint Press in 2019. Her second book of poems, A Long Late Pledge, won the Dorothy Brunsman Poetry Prize and was released by Bear Star Press in September 2017. In the last two books, both of these books that I just mentioned were finalists for the Oregon Book Award. She's a faculty member of poetry and creative nonfiction at the Ed Institute in Portland, Oregon. And welcome, is your title a director? Just chief color. Okay, well, we have the chief cook and bottle washer from the United States, right here, David Weisfield. So, we give David a hand. Well, thank you. I just want to give you a hand for everything that you've done for poetry and for the community. So, thank you for that. Wendy is also the executive director of Deliberative Democracy Consortium, the founder and director of the Oregon's Kitchen Table. She served as a federal public defender and as the law clerk for Chief Justice Wallace B. Carson Jr. of the Oregon Supreme Court. She graduated magna cum laude from Georgetown Law Center and holds a BA from Willamette University and an MFA in poetry from the Rainier Writing Workshop at Pacific Lutheran University. What a resume. I believe it's forward here when you read to us. Would you join me in welcoming our poet tonight, Wendy Willis? Be sure and watch the corridor.
I will do.
So
I don't want to mess up the technology.
if you go around, just go this way.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Tom. And thank you everyone for being here. It's so strange and beautiful to be in the same space together instead of in tiny squares. Letting library is just a gift, like to the really to poetry and to literature around the state. So I'm really honored to be here and to be person. I was saying to Tom that it's we all like rush from the last thing, right? And then try to come around the campfire together. So as part of that moment, I was going to share a poem. I looked and looked and looked because I really wanted to share a poem from Charles Simic today, who we lost earlier this week, and I love and admire, but really, he's not my guy. So rather than sharing a Simic poem, I am going to share a poem from another Eastern European, although a Polish poet, Czesław Miłosz, who is my guy. And this poem is called Incantation. Human reason is beautiful and invincible. No bars, no barbed wire, no pulping of books. No sentence of banishment can prevail against it. It establishes the universal ideas in language and guides our hands to rewrite truth and justice with capital letters, lie and oppression with small. It puts what should be above things as they are. It's an enemy of despair and a friend of. It does not know Jew from Greek or slave from master, giving us the estate of the world to manage. It saves austere and transparent phrases. From the filthy discord of tortured words, it says that everything is new under the sun. Opens the congealed fist of the past, beautiful and very young, of philosophia, and poetry, her ally in the service of the good. As late as yesterday, nature celebrated their birth. The news was brought to the mountains by a unicorn and an echo. Their friendship will be glorious. Their time has no limits. Their enemies have delivered themselves to destruction. So let's live in that world. So I'm just, going to poke around here and there in these books, and then share a couple of newer poems near the end. This first poem is called Saturday Night at Mary Todd Workers Bar and Grill. And I don't know if any of you have ever seen this bar. It's on the road into Astoria. And I was very excited about it because I just believed that I thought it was going to be a very, ruffian bar. And it turned out it was full of like fancy wine and Portlanders. And I was so disappointed. And so it's beautiful, but not what I thought it was going to be. So this poem is about a night that we spent at Mary Todd's Workers Bar and Grill. In the way that such things begin, a poet walks into a bar in search of America, sniffing for flag soaked bromides and a whiff of the wobblies, for one last drunk, cockfights and walnuts, for a donut philosopher, a breadline optimist, but the longshoremen are long missing and the bar is slumped fiddler, a painter, and a postman who sends a code. Not even a quarter mile off this purse-proud wharf, and the only answer is this: looking for work. Oh, citizens of industry, praise be. The poet arrives in time for declamations and match-antiques. Recall the Benedictines, to labor is to pray. Then they pass the baby Jesus hand to hand. The painter whispers memento mori, as if he could forget. The others coo back, no, it's separate fun. A hobbled witness now, the poet sits and knits alongside her clacking mind, nursing her fealty to the nation. The tenderness of the word post shatters her resolve, and under her breath, I seem to be the scapegoat for both drizzle and drought. She turns her ear toward the night black river, her tongue toward the days. Okay, this next one's called Writ of Habeas Corpus. I think, as Tom mentioned, I worked in the Federal Public Defender's for 10 years. And so in the Federal Defender's Office, state prisoners can actually appeal to federal court to get out of federal court. So I spent a lot of time actually working with state prisoners under the Writ of Habeas Corpus. So it's one of the constitutional rights that I know well. Love in this republic has small habits, rising like yeast in midsummer, spreading bread from the tip of a tent needle. But I know enough to ask, is prophecy more conjure or conjecture? Answer slowly. The wind is a well-trained dog. The sunset is the work of a thief. The price of liberty is the color of algae, and the earth stops turning in the hour between dishes. Even housemates guess avert their eyes. The kitchen throws off its own weather, hovering between tenderness and complaint. Now my indiscretions tend toward the botanical. Hot house is florid, wicked but too fragile for cross-examination. I know the key is buried in the shallow pit. Once I saw a photograph of a wounded rabbit, a lethal plastic cone over its tiny wild face, the dark mercy of a hairless, murmuring beast. No wind off the river, no grass under foot. I'm not quite getting everywhere. See, it's me too hard of it. Right. I think there's okay. So I'll try to speak as loud as thank you. Okay.
If your voice is projecting out instead of down.
I will do my best. See, I'm gonna switch for
And the word is so beautiful.
no, I know. It's so aggravating to not be able to hear.
Where's your smile?
Actually, when I was a lawyer, I had a court reporter who became my friend, and she had a sign when I would stand up that said "slow down." And she,
So you heard this before.
yeah. And yeah, it's a combination of not a loud voice. This poem is a poem that I wrote for my dad, calling "How It Came to Be That the Rook Took the Queen." And my dad was a very good chess player and a mathematician, and so I had written a poem that I thought was a mathematical poem, and I have to show you the picture actually. He then corrected it and wrote it down for me. Like he actually had on my bulletin board his handwritten explanation of the Pythagorean theorem. So this is an attempt to correct my misunderstanding of the Pythagorean theorem for my dad, the mathematician, chess player. How it came to be that the rook took the queen. You know, I never did see a coyote in town, though I kept suggesting so, spinning tales like of link gold eyes, a low-down slink to distract from the fact that I could not track how the rook's straight path could end in a hook, or how to calculate the area east of my hypotenuse. No, and I still do not know how to add my abacus, though I brought you one on more than one occasion. But since I am no longer a young woman, it seems a good time to come clean. I did see a horse in a green velvet jacket and an executioner's eye shade. A clamor of rooks on the grounds of the Tower of London, and in New York City, they've got an aircraft carrier for show. But why didn't I tell you about that? About the blanched branches of the curly willow and the sky dimmed half dark pink? And why didn't I tell you about when the cherry trees out front split in two? That tree was fruit bearing but showy, so it was as pink as it would ever be. The March rains kept on and it fell bustle up like a fancy woman in parade. Why then didn't I tell you that? In the midst of all that saying and not, still you shimmied up the ladder, father, oh father, knuckles creaking and pointing north, knees clanking against the garage, you shoveled the gutters. Even then, did you know of the 100 bowls Pythagoras ordered slaughtered in honor of his theorem, while I was down there holding the ladder and holding forth about the dreamed up coyote bedding down on the peonies and slipping the Thanksgiving carcass off the porch? Did you know that he, Pythagoras, not the coyote, was reputed to have a golden eye? I know, you know, it's bad luck to hang a calendar before January the 1st, to light 3 cigarettes on one match, to plant seeds in the last 4 days of March. And you'll recall that Judas Iscariot was the 13th banquet guest. For that, Herbert Hoover wouldn't tolerate dinner for one more than 12. No, they hire a stand-in, father, you goodly mathematician. Do you believe me when I tell you I never knew till now that squared as in 3 squared is 9, as in 4 squared is 16, as in a squared plus b squared meant a thing? No. But slowly now the rooks and you are gone silent in this frayed afternoon light, and I can see the roof's pitched peaks casting off shadows. Squares, squared, as in nailed together 4-sided solid square. And suddenly Pythagoras and his smoky bowls and his prohibition against the eating of meat and even beans and the shimmer off the roof and the use of the abacus to teach math to the blind, it all comes together. And I can see the chest rug make a hooked move toward the queen, and a ladder leaning south is most certainly a sign of love. This poem is about this crazy house finch that sort of took a liking to our dining room window, and it would just come over and over and over again, and it wouldn't run into it; it would just peck at it. And it came for a couple of seasons, and then it was done. So this is called House Finch Returns to Chastise the Household for its late winter lassitude. By now we know that children no longer learn cursive. They loop along fine with sans serif and V's broken free from their E's. It's a topic for antithesis, a chance to recall our hallowed days. We who ask will decipher the missives of poets and philosopher kings. Meanwhile, that chirripity bird with its heart stained on its breast has its own set of opinions. But I'm not sure they're worth a continental. It's an all-out racket, an unplanned tell it to me, brother, amen. I know it's bummed, but I can't help thinking twice about girls budding breast too early and boys bedding down in the desert. Why, of all the unholy households in this republic, did it choose this one to chastise? Is there so much to mistrust because last fall's caterpillars still pearl in the jelly jar? Because we can't call our ghosts by name, there must be legions of them, fishermen and lumbermen and lonely women. For our defense, we've settled on this. It's a force majeure, a plan pure, the certitude of wars that won't end. We've given ourselves over to sugar ants and mid-afternoon champagne. The furrows are fallow. We may as well beat prams into plowshares now, with the president and his milk-skinned men coiled at the ready while our one curvy girl curling on my lap, but too big to fully fit, twist cruelly the tales of G's and Y's, practicing for roll call and roadhouses and roles we have yet to name. Ah, spring fine bird, surely can't be that far off now, for I'm fretting about the long-legged nature of things. He'll do one pink ear for answers, disinclined to go on. I'm gonna read you a poem. So I actually will often read this poem alongside an essay that tells the story of what happened. And I actually, when I was in kindergarten, is when Watergate happened. And I was so excited. I could not understand what this thing was, but it sounded so amazing. And like, Watergate, that sounds so cool. And I just couldn't believe what magical thing must be happening that they were talking about it on the news constantly. And then I asked my mom what it was, and she said a hotel. And I was like, a hotel? And it was just like, I felt like at this point just shattered off of me. So this is the poem that I remember exactly where I was. We were turning the corner right by the wood chip, and she said it's a hotel. Watergate. I still don't dare name the bend in the road where I first heard the word, the one trembling like a tuning fork, like a nosebleed. Fir chips piled high as the gritty foothills, smoldering with ruffles, chupping with shame. Our mothers rattle-stiff muslin drapes all across that bright blue. And even so, I hear the radio newsman draw his first sharp breath. Slit with the alphabet of the dumb, my mind fissures worthlessness. Spun glassy with words passing by, but not through. Pelican, Port-au-Prince, plasma, platypus, lipids, listeria, lassitude, Lord of the Dance, said he, gangrene, gladiola, graciousness, bliss, willobark, wisteria, wanderlust, woe. And just like that, I recall last summer's sparrow, kept in my two brittle hands, a flittering in the chest, a stone in the chin and the throat, an instant prick like the tip of a pin, shimmering between the fluttered gloss of open palms and the shattering press of her. And more of this product. And then I'll read a couple more for you. So I realized once I got in the car that I actually wrote two migraine poems. So this is the first of the migraine poems. Because when you have a migraine, that's all you can think about. So apparently I think about it a lot. This is called Speaking of Pyromancy, or the Promise of Divination by Fire. Last evening, I could not for the life of me recall the name for sumac. Even as its scarlet tips wicked the sun's last hour, flamed out, and then half shimmered in the near dark, I wanted to call out to you, my love, but I could not recall. Sycamore? No, then it was just milkweed or lamb's ear come to mind, all light and no heat. Or maybe it's the other way around. It took till late to recall, sumac, while I was lying awake, wondering how you feel now that we're in ordinary time, now that we're out of the coffee shop and into the bed. One thing leads to another. A coffee cup, a kerosene flame, the end of the Virgin Queen. Don't quote me on that. You know, my mother planted sumac near the back door, fingered the sticky leaves as she walked back and forth with the wash. I don't know why. Probably for the same reason she set down overcooked lima beans and fatback, wore blue beaded moccasins in the house. When the long, short vowels of sumac came back, I was lying there, lying to myself, pretending I could not see the blue migrate promise stalking the edges of my eyes, my mind, like a dream ready to resurface once you hear the words tax sale or a glimpse of the tail of a garter snake whip into the heat of cracked foundation. Beginning, tingling edges, a film of lead on the tongue. Middle, Bunsen burner blind and the tip of a fireplace poker to the scalp. and lying alone in the dark. I don't want to die in West Virginia. You can quote me on that. It's time to tell you now, darling. My father's brother set my grandmother on fire outright. A gas can, a cigarette, polyester pants. All things I've avoided, but I'm not sure what it says about the gene pool. And meanwhile, my little daughter's singing Jackson in the back seat. We got married in a fever, hotter than a pepper sprout. We've been talking about Jackson ever since the fire went. Of all people, I know you understand wayward brothers and the songs of children, but still there's so much to tell. My one and only last night horsewoman hummed a 3-bit song with the tongue of a thrush. I know that arsenic burns blue and honey never rots. Chavela Vargas was Frida Kahlo's lover. She said, I drank everything I ever owned. That's why I left nothing. And John Wesley recalling the song list, I just set myself on fire and folks came to watch me burn. And you, your own sweet self, you're dead longer than you're alive, a lot longer. You have a tell, my one, that smells of smoke. And somewhere in the sulfur burning yellow of my mind, I could see forward to that moment where death swirls as a stinking sea mist and life is solid as a cast iron pot. But the wind shifts, and death is a bucket of wet sand. And what's that? A whisper in the dark, suman, and smudged lipstick on a pet. Okay, so I've been reading these two poems from a new whatever it is, before it becomes a book, project, obsession. And these are, it's a project about the 40 days between, with the 40 days when Jesus spent on earth before the ascension. So I'm going to read you day 4 and day 2. Day 4 is called After the Arborist. They arrive as a visitation, not quite winter, not quite spring. Varied thrushes, ash-baked, whispering promises of sweaterlessness. As it is above, so it is below. Hush, hush. A circle in a circle, inside a circle, a tingle, an aura, an eclipse behind my eyes. My father's old work shirt tossed over a silk blouse, smooth, immense, but not soft enough to soothe nerve out of the skin. The round whine of the power saw, gassy and rank, splintering the sky white, bending only toward gold, the shroud beneath my eyes. And still I wait for them to light, to pick pearly whiffs of willow, pick, fly, pick, fly. The afternoon shatters silver, and soon the thrushes will honk along. Here and gone, fickle, particular, a rush of wings, a halo of light, at least you can see the sky. And this is day 2, I think. Holy Week, Pleasure Pier, Galveston, Texas. No longer are the days filled with loaves and fishes, even knowing it won't be so long until the wind picks up. We will be 2 feet 16 inches below high water. What will it mean to be patient then? With the dawn milked and still as a lapsed cat? Sea fog, not so much rolling as slinking over wet sand and seawall. I say to my beloved, I will wait. Here among the unnerved and the faithless, I check my watch. Salt cries 1 hour from the next. Not half silty breath, held but one expelled as the clack of a mantle slaps against the wall. I don't dare look at what the simmery tide has wrought. Oil rig, hot wind, cephalopod, dangle 1 foot, pray for rest. So I know you want to do a couple questions, then I'll do one more before. Yeah. Not you personally, but
Okay,
yeah.
so we're ready for a question.
Yeah.
and answer.
If you have any comments.
Then Wendy's going to end the reading for the final poem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, could you talk about being an essayist and poet? So
Yeah,
and how you blend or.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, I mean, it's fun. Yeah, yeah. Say it again.
Keep apart.
Keep apart. Yeah, yeah. I mean, so many people do, right? It's like that's. I had a friend who's a fiction writer who said, how come so many nonfiction writers used to be poets? And I said, because it's so much easier. I actually didn't write very many poems during the Trump. I was so amped up all the time. I think my nervous system was so out of whack that I felt I was really mostly writing prose. And then, like, as my nervous system has returned to like just a dull roar, I've been able to return to poems a little bit. And so, yeah, I think it's an interesting like observational question, right? Like it's more about how you see it.
What have you written essays about?
I write a regular column for a newspaper, online national newspaper called the Fulcrum. So I write a lot. I'm writing a lot right now about democracy and democratic practices. I just wrote one about constitutional reform, and so that's a lot of what our essay form is about. White children and the and the democratic world.
You blend your lawyerly point of view and your poetic point of view, or
I don't know. I mean, the precision of language certainly is a common thread, right? Like just and there's a guy actually. I don't know if he's still alive, but he was a faculty member at University of West Virginia, and he did this exercise to try to identify all the lawyer poets in the United States. And he had this idea that he was going to bring everyone together. And then the pandemic happened, and one thing came to another. But it's not, we know the famous ones like Wells, right? But there, I guess there's a fair number, not that many, but a fair number of men who are lawyers and poets.
when did you start writing poetry?
I have been writing poems for kind of a long time. I mean, or some version of poems, like compressed language, let's call it that, rather than maybe poems. But and reading poems for a really long time. So I think it's just, at some point you're like, I'm gonna try that. What would that be like? As a young person, and kind of just sort of kept sort of plowing along throughout my life career.
I have two questions.
Yes.
First one is how has your creative process evolved with your poetry?
Yeah.
From when you started to like be in the middle of the court and being like, that's a poem.
You know what I mean? Like, is it something like that?
Yeah.
And then the second one is, what is your editing process?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So the first one, I think is how I'm getting super interested in visual art, like the companion pieces of visual art. I think a lot of trying to sort of keep visual images alive for me, like re-enlivening them by trying to understand them physically. And so that's my little obsession right now. There's a poet who's a faculty member at Whitman named Katrina Roberts, and I mean, I guess she was a visual artist before, but we know her as a poet, and now she's doing these combined pieces that are really quite incredible. Some of them are sort of erasure. Some of them, I can't remember what her new book is called, but it came out from Finish Line just recently, in the last couple of weeks or month maybe, and it's these visual images, full color, and then it's almost like reads like a title, but the combination of the visual image and line or two of poetry is very striking. She's really, really good. Yeah, it's Katrina Roberts. Yeah, so I think I'm just become more and more interested in that, like visual artists who use text writers who are interested in visual images, and so that's my little obsession. Of course, it slows. Like I was already slow, and it just slows things down even more. But it's really fun, and I'm actually at the attic working on teaching a notebook class, and it's really fun to try to like work with folks to like, what do you do to keep this alive for you before you make it into something? Like how do you just sort of don't jump too soon to making something? And that just, I find that process to be, that's what creates surprise, right? Yeah. And so I think that's really exciting. I can't remember the question was about editing, which is actually really related, I think. Because a lot of these poems are super, super intricate, I hardly ever revise. Like I really don't revise much because don't write it until it's pretty built. And so I'll really edit a little, but oftentimes it's easier to just abandon it because it's such a contraption that if you like pull this thing out, the whole thing falls down. And so it's just, so like I'm really front load work. I wait a long time before I start to actually make it into a poem. Weeks.
So, if you mind.
No?
So what does that physically? Is that like in your head, things are happening?
No, it's by hand, right? So I write tons of stuff by hand, notes, images, like swatches of paint, whatever. And then eventually I'll go, okay, I'm ready to put it in the computer. And I actually just type it into the computer whole. So a poem could be like 20 pages of notes. And then build it from that. So yeah, so it is kind of intricate, and once in a while a revision will happen, but usually it's like, oh wait, I tried to pull that out, and the whole thing just went boom. Yeah, right, exactly. So yeah, exactly. So you have to either like paint over it, right? And it's like, or yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Totally.
Well, I have two questions too. Who would you say influenced you, and who are you reading?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, there's, I have my people, right? But I mean, the poet who really comes to mind is C.D. Wright, who, because the inner and the outer world were so, there's this like electric space where those two things meet for her, and also just a sort of very idiosyncratic process. Like her, I don't know if many of you know the book Deep Step, I'm Shining. That book, she claims that her mother was a court reporter and her father was a judge. And she wrote a lot of it on court reporter tape, supposedly, and then like hung it up around her office or her studio, and then she like cut it up and put it together. And so in the book, you'll see at the beginning of the sections, there's this sort of images of court reporters tape. And she really, it's very much organized emotionally logical, and that sort of process I found it just like totally, like the first time I read that book, I was like, that's it, that's the book, and that's the place that I'm really interested in. And then who am I reading now? Right now, I've returned to Liesl Müller, the German poet. She writes in German, and mostly because of her relationship to the material world. Like that, she's very poems have a big emotional turn in them. Everyone has an emotional turn in it, but the material world is super present, and especially in interior world, like the interior of the house. Which, I think it's so easy for us to like turn to metaphors that are in the natural world, and I know that's my habit. And so just to see someone who interiors actually create a huge sort of metaphoric possibility, I really admire that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Should we end with one more?
Well, if any more questions?
I have to.
Yeah.
I'm really fascinated by how logical you are, like with your approach. And I always feel like hair's on fire, chicken, all that sort of. So how is there an intentional balance for you? Like when you're approaching a home, is it emotional? Is it a slice of life that you're just replaying? I can't,
Yeah.
and like it's your relationships to the stories you're telling are very interesting in that there's this distance, but there is emotional connection. And I'm just trying to figure out how you're putting this together so well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think of myself as being that logical. Like, no one in my office would say that. So I think, I mean, I do have a very kind of idiosyncratic approach, but I don't know that it's really, it really is about juxtaposition, I would say. Like once you get all that material in there, you're, suddenly relationships start to reveal themselves. And so I just don't trust the top of my mind. So, because it's boring and because I've said it all before and I'm just like, so I really am always trying to like get beyond that top thinking, and the vocabulary of the top of my mind is boring too. And so just whatever, like, to try to excavate these other feelings and thoughts, experiences and connections. And then once you see them all together, you're like, oh, now I can, there's this fissure that appears. So does that answer your question? Yeah.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, well, one of the things about poems is I love telling jokes to myself and it's from poems. And so, so this last poem, just remember what page it's on. Is it's called Citizen Poet. Then arose an unseasonable noxious wind, leaving me tongue split and sniffing for lightning, blown sideways into the lamp black of a Congress prost. They circling deep in widdershins, scolding and vowelless, coughing forth the original hail to the chief. Me, tattered but proud and crowned with grape leaves and chewing gum foil, clinging to my pocket copy of the Bill of Rights and mouthing certain glittering words. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. I was quick to learn, none of my kind can suss out the signs. Though these things I know for sure. Right warning shocks like a lumen across the tongue. The price of tobacco remains ever stable. Lilacs and camellias trade for little but soothes the mind of a lonely traveler. Alder whispers its name, or warbles it for money. Here there are few visitors to the gallery of famous poets and botanists, but still I mistook this prayerless and tar-ridged land for a nation state, for an empire, for a kingdom. And I would have accepted any appointment, serf or subject, peasant or scold, but the paper-skinned oracle would have none of it. Here, even minor cabinet ministers stand for election. Election day breaks ravishing. The bald cypress shakes free its needles and spits its most favorite word, liberty. The crows trade cigarettes and tear through the trees, scattering prayer candles and dollars. As for me, if elected, I will peel back the black earth and lay bare what is scratched. Poet, liar, citizen of the unconscious. And yet, with all the ancient liberties and free customs, the ballots are burned with aplomb. The wind dies down and it's unanimous. I am expelled with a hacksaw, a faint salute, a nosegay of orange nasturtium and wilting honeysuckle. On the surface, the old streets wind bright and unmappable. I cannot measure the length of the hours or recall the name of each ashen face. Pliny the Elder turns out to be unreliable. Crows do not speak with a split tongue, and wine is rife with lies. The shadow of Bruce's black feathers cast long in the mind of the returned. I cannot flirt the comforts now, no, but I will carry this dark cinder for the nation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Couple of things I wanted to mention. One is books, talking about books. Where would you recommend people get your books?
Thank you. Get them anywhere but yourself, although I do have a few with me.
You do have.
Because you reminded me to.
Okay, well, good.
Yes.
My lovely wife Jane is going to be selling books back here in the table in the corner. Okay. That's great.
Well, there was a table up there.
Oh, it's the round table or the rectangular table, one of those tables. Yeah, okay. All right, so that's good. So there's some books back.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Secondly, I forgot to say earlier, we don't have a broadside this month, so sorry about that. The poem is on the broadside is Holy Week Pleasure Fear. Yeah, that Wendy read earlier. So what we're going to do is we will send that out as an email. So both for you here, if you've signed the guest book, and for everybody who's on the live stream, we'll send the broadside out as an email. We'll also make a hard copy of them. So if you're here next month, then you would get 2 broadsides, which is a broadside of Wendy's poem, and she will have some, and then a broadside of the poet who is going to be here on February. That's Zachary Schomburg.
No,
Melanie Green.
Melanie Green? Okay. Thank you. Get this backwards so you can understand. Yeah, Melanie Green. So that's what we will do with the. Thank you again. Thank you for your good hands. And thank you, everybody that's been watching on live stream. We're happy to have you here. And I'm Tom Hogan for the Milwaukie Poetry Series. Thank you for being here. We'll see how that.